Hi, my name is Angel Gambino, and I am a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, former media and entertainment executive, and I am currently a partner at Co-Create by Prehype, which is a venture studio that partners with innovators within large corporations to create entirely new products, services, and businesses, separate subsidiaries. So I am excited to have you here today, but especially to hear from a longtime friend and co-investor, Fabrice Grinda. And Fabrice is the founding partner of FJ Labs, and he'll tell you a little bit about FJ Labs today. But he is also a wildly successful entrepreneur with multiple exits under his belt. And he has over 150 exits based on over 500 angel investments. I have to get all these numbers right because there are so many. It's hard to imagine. And with all that experience, as you might imagine, he's got lots of insights and knowledge that he's going to share with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Fabrice Grinda. So Fabrice, you're in Turks and Caicos, yeah?
I am.
Okay, I don't want to elaborate too much on that because I think I'll get a little jealous, even though it's nice, here in Marin. So have you been spending most of the quarantine period in Turks and Caicos then?
Yeah, in February, I wrote a blog post suggesting that coronavirus and COVID-19 might be the black swan that would tip the global economy in recession, and that we needed to take this seriously. And so in early March, I sent an email to my friends and like, look, I'm leaving. I'm coming to Turks to hang out during quarantine there. I think avoiding high density locations like New York City probably makes the most sense. And so I was there, or I was here from March 14 all the way to August 21st, and frankly, a delightful place to spend quarantine.
Yeah, and what, like, you of all people could choose just about anywhere in the world. So what made you choose that location?
Maybe taking a step back, it comes down to a more life setup, right? So my personal life setup is one where the center of my intellectual, artistic, and professional activities is New York City. And I love New York from that perspective. It's surrounded by like so many other really interesting people that it's the place where you could be the most fulfilled in every level, like professionally, artistically, socially, intellectually. I host intellectual salons, etc. But if you're doing constantly, you're not thinking. And so I like to spend a month in New York where it's super busy at every level, and then take a month somewhere else that is more rural where I'm still working during the day. And the good news in a way from my personal perspective is my life is ready Zoom calls and emails prior to COVID-19. So nothing really changed from that perspective, but I'd be in a place where there's really nothing else to do. And as a result, you take the time to read more, to write more, etc. Like here, I read 3-4 books a week, and in New York, I read 1 book every 3 weeks. So it's completely different. And when I'm down here, I write a lot more for my blog. I try to think through our theses and what the mega trends that are happening in the world in a way that I don't have the time to be reflective. And at the same time, I can be a lot healthier here in the sense that I can play tennis every day and kite surf and play paddle and be a lot more athletic than a city like New York, frankly, affords you the ability to be that.
For sure. I think, we can all use to be as healthy as we possibly can. So anything that kind of optimizes those opportunities is great. We've been doing a lot of hiking, which definitely I think helps keeps the lungs going, right? And so what, now that you've had several months to think about, what's kind of, happening throughout the startup ecosystem and throughout the world, and also increasing the readership by that amount is pretty impressive. I've been surprised by how many books I've been going through, but which books can you recommend based on the ones that you've read? And also, now that you've had some time to kind of settle into your thinking, what are you seeing happening throughout the startup ecosystem, specifically during this period, either within your portfolio or,
Right.
More broadly?
Well, so in terms of books, look, first of all, I don't read business books writ large. I think mostly they're uninteresting. And so I'd say my reading, I read about 100 books a year, 70% fiction, 30% nonfiction. And the fiction is like sci-fi, fantasy, I'd say casual reading. And then in the non-casual reading, it's whatever catches my attention at this point in time. So the most recent books I read that I loved were The Biggest Bluff, which is this book by this New Yorker author who decided after a string of bad luck to understand the role luck plays in life and how you can control it by becoming a professional poker player, having never played cards ever or poker in her life. And it's fantastic. I just finished a book called Moonshots, which is how organizations can maintain and continue to be innovative even as they scale. It's true of countries, governments, and as well and companies. I read Lifespan by David Sinclair and how to have longer, healthy lives, and Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker would be the 4 nonfiction books I'd recommend. I mean, I'd also recommend Sapiens, but by now I assume everyone's read it. And to answer your second question on the impact of COVID-19 on the tech ecosystem, the reality is that even though the world writ large is undergoing massive suffering, and there with all the death, with all the small business bankruptcies, with high unemployment, with essentially the equivalent of an economic depression, crises in general are super accelerators of underlying trends. So if you look at the Great Depression in the 20th century, it's actually the period which had the fastest economic growth, productivity growth, in the 20th century. And I guess necessity is the mother of invention. And we see as well in the last, the most interesting companies of the last decade actually were all created in the 08-09 financial crisis. Uber, Airbnb, Slack, WhatsApp, all came out of 08-09. And right now, when we look, I suspect the same thing will be true in the decade to come. The companies that will be the most relevant in the 2020s will be the companies that either came of age or were created in this period. Now, if I look at the portfolio, I'd say 90% of startups are doing better than they were doing prior to the pandemic, because there's been a massive acceleration of online education, online telemedicine, online remote work, online conferencing, online public services, and acceleration of things like e-commerce, food delivery. And so most startup companies, by definition, were doing things online in a more efficient way. And we've seen tremendous growth. I mean, think of a company like Instacart. Instacart, which is in the grocery delivery space, last year did $5 billion in sales. When you're at $5 billion in sales, which is really large scale, you no longer expect hyper growth. You think, okay, maybe they'll grow 50% a year and everyone will be happy with that. They 4x to $20 billion this year. And this is not an atypical happening in our portfolio. And anything related to food delivery, e-commerce writ large is doing extraordinarily well. Gaming, now there's a 10% that is really hurting, because they're in the categories directly affected by COVID-19. So anything in tourism or travel, anything in offline events, or selling at offline venues, or if you look at Live Nation's revenues, I think we're down 96% in the second quarter. And so if you're in offline events, you're hurting. But for the most part, I'd say it's 30%. 5x bigger than before, 30% ahead of projections, 30% on projection, and 10% crushed. But for the most part, I'd say technology at large, and that's true at the large scale companies, the Amazons of the world, but it's true of the startups, are doing a lot better than they were even prior to the pandemic, because it's accelerated the transition. People that would have never considered buying online or doing telemedicine are now doing it. And so it's really accelerating these trends.
And what about in regards to fundraising? I know that there was lots of speculation around it being more challenging because existing investors would want to kind of, hold on and take care of their existing portfolio and, et cetera. How have you kind of personally responded? Has it been any different than before? And what have you seen on the fundraising front, more for kind of early stage, either seed or Series A, et cetera?
Well, it was definitely true in March, in April, when there was like peak fear of what was going to happen. fundraising was a lot harder. And so at that point in time, my recommendation to startups was, look, batter down the ashes, weather the storm. You know, if you're big enough and you can get profitability, focus on that. If you're small and you can't get there because you don't have the scale, just extend your runway. And we're seeing people focus more on things like unit economics than before. So in this day and age, making sure that you can get to the next round and prove that you have a viable entity in the long run is more powerful than it was before, where maybe growth was more predominant. But in the last few months, where people have seen to what extent e-commerce and online startups as a whole benefit so tremendously, I'd say it's as easy to fundraise as it was in Q4 of last year. And we're going to have our most prolific year yet. I think we're at over 100 investments so far this year. We'll end the year at over 130, 140, which might be the most we've ever made in a given year. So the environment is frothy, and obviously it's frothy because there's a lot of liquidity out there. Interest rates being low means that a lot of people are looking for places to deploy capital. And as of right now, the IPO markets are open, and we're seeing a lot of exits. I mean, there's clearly a bubble going on in one specific part of the market, which is a SPAC world, where you have all these SPACs being raised. And if we look at our portfolio, I think we have like 13 companies in various stages of IPOing or SPACing. And the companies that are SPACing are usually the ones who are doing okay or well, but not extraordinarily well. The ones doing really well are going public on their own.
Yeah. And in terms of, how you're like, I think one of the great things with playing with unicorns, which did you start that now because you have this like extra time and you're like, okay, I can actually like really do it properly now? Or, kind of what was the thinking behind that? Because one of the things, I think it's really great, by the way, like you pack so much value and so much information in such a short period of time. And I think it's enormously useful for founders and for entrepreneurs. But I also think that, now with the kind of expansion of the definition of, accredited investor, at least opening up new categories of potential, investors into private entities, that, that there are, potentially a whole new group of angel investors. So I think it's potentially also good for aspiring angel investors to really understand what it takes and getting into the nitty gritty of what product market fit really looks like. So tell us a little bit about playing with unicorns and also how you're kind of helping to kind of educate, entrepreneurs and new investors.
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back, and in life, people typically do two things, right? We have our to-do list of all the things we'd like to do, and in general, and the things that get done are the things that are super urgent and the things that are super important. And kind of everything else, the nice to have never happens. And I think there's different personality types of, now you have more free time because you're in the pandemic, you're not traveling, you're not going to musicals, I'm not hosting these intellectual dinners. What do I do with this extra time? And so for me, it was all the things I've been needing to do but never had the time to do, I decided to do. So I got a lot better at tennis. I completely redesigned my blog. I started writing a lot more. I redesigned the website for the property that I own in Turks and Caicos so I can rent it out on the market. And one of the things I've been needing to do is think through, okay, I get a lot of questions. So I get asked to go and teach classes at universities, and usually, again, it's very elite universities. So it's always like Harvard and Princeton and Stanford and like entrepreneurship or marketplace or venture capital. And a lot of people that I meet, even one-on-one, have kind of the same questions. And the issue with that is it's not completely scalable. So I was like, could I create, to get that professorship itch out of the way and provide information that I think would be useful to the masses, especially as the future for me is more entrepreneurship, right? With the low-code, no-code revolution, more people that don't have the traditional CS Stanford degree are going to be in a position to be entrepreneurs. As you have the passion economy coming into play, what are all the things that I wish I knew when I was starting out as a 23-year-old entrepreneur that I now know that I can create as content and make digestible? And I thought long and hard about what the right format was, and I'm like, I'm going to create I'm doing it live because it kind of explains why the production values are not great, because I don't have a business model for this. I don't have, an editing team or anyone helping me with this. It's like really a labor of love. It's also the fact that it's weekly is forcing me to like spend the time to prepare the content. And I decided, okay, I don't want to be interviewing people because I feel that often it's the same people doing the rounds. I really wanted like specific content production. How do you find product market fit? How do you do landing page analysis? How do you build your MVP? How do you fundraise? And basically do a like scalable tech entrepreneurship 101 equivalent course. And I don't know how long it'll last, but it's every Thursday at noon EST on various streaming platforms. And whenever I run out of content, I'll probably end, but I have weeks and weeks and weeks to go. No, it's been fun. And it's actually been really useful, because in order to teach something, you need to actually really own it and be able to distill it and prepare it. And so in terms of like structuring my thoughts in a form that's digestible, especially things, since the way we've been operating at FJ Labs is every year, we come up with like a couple hundred ideas. But we never like actually took the time to, how do we come up with these ideas? What are the processes for ideation? And so now we're like codifying that. And then every year we evaluate ideas to define whether or not we're going to build a few of these, and how do we decide if an idea is good or not. And so actually coming up with the processes and defining them, we're actually doing it. We just had never codified it. So actually the codifying it part is extremely valuable even internally in terms of improving our thought processes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, we've done a fair bit of that at Pre-Hype in terms of, okay, we've now got, over 50 ventures throughout the portfolio, and it's like, okay, there's certain commonality in terms of how you approach, creating the new ventures, whether it's, how
Sure.
we go about, validating the idea, et cetera. And I think it can be enormously useful to have that kind of codification, because then you can really dive deeper and have more of that expansive space around, whether it's like reframing what the problem is, or just looking at it from different customer viewpoints or different user, perspectives. It would probably be good for those people who aren't really familiar with the FJ Labs model, if you're able to kind of, expand on that a bit, because
Right.
I think it's unique in the market. And I love that you guys have so many different lenses to view opportunities. You guys are real hard asses when it comes to numbers. And I think, I know some of the deals that I've, brought to the team, I try to prep the founders beforehand, because I'm like, they're going to ask you for some really concrete numbers, way more than you're going to get, from some other guys. So it'd be great to hear, about how the FJ Labs model has kind of evolved over time, where you guys are spending most of your time now, and what you kind of really look for when new entrepreneurs are coming to you, whether that's, a marketplace business or something else.
Yeah, I mean, look, I never set out to be a venture capitalist. It just so happens that when you're a consumer-facing internet CEO that is reasonably public and visible, a lot of entrepreneurs start asking for money and advice. And so from the very beginning of my entrepreneurial journey back in '98, I started angel investing. And so I was always kind of had this dual role of being entrepreneur, angel investor. And because I was so busy running companies, I mean, my last large company had 5,000 employees in 30 countries, as you know well, I mean, OLX. And I was super busy doing that. I'm like, okay, I need to create a set of heuristics and theses and philosophies to allow me to evaluate companies quickly. And I'll focus my knitting, which are our marketplaces, because I understand them. And by virtue of running one, I'm in a better position to evaluate others. And so by 2013, when I left OLX, I was like, okay, I like building companies. I like investing in companies. I could see myself being an entrepreneur again, but I don't have an amazing idea to build right now. Why don't I create a structure that allows me to do both of these? So FJ Labs is a hybrid venture fund, which invests in 100, 150 startups a year. Again, we don't lead, we don't take board seats, and we focus on marketplaces, and mostly seed in the US, but we're kind of like early stages in general and global. And then every year for fun, we build one or two companies de novo in a studio model, where We go to the top business schools. We interview the top 250 students who apply to our program. We take 2, and these 2 become apprentices. We teach during the summer during the first, second year, and part-time during the second year, and then they graduate and become entrepreneurs in residence until we find an idea to build together. And every year we build 2 companies de novo together. We provide the first 2.75 million. The team gets the majority of the equity, and I become co-founder. Usually, executive chairman. The role I play is usually product, so technology. It's frankly whatever the company needs. And we built like 10 of these over the last 7 years or so, and it's been super fun. And this way, I can both be a founder and entrepreneur on the one hand, and be an investor on the other side. Now, to answer your second question, which is how do people come to us? When they come to us, how do we evaluate them, and what do we look for? I think in a way, all VCs use 4 different criteria for evaluating entrepreneurs. They just weigh them differently, and for us, it's the same 4 criteria, but they're all kind of required. And it's 1, do we like the team? And I'll explain what that means. 2, do we like the business? 3, do we like the deal terms that are available to us? And 4, is it in line with our thesis of where the world is headed? Now, the thing is, every VC you meet will tell you, oh, I only invest in extraordinary entrepreneurs. The thing is, if you don't define what an extraordinary entrepreneur is, I think it leads to a lot of biases, because most people have a tendency to like people that are like to approve and appreciate people that are like themselves. And most VCs are white males, and they have a tendency to back entrepreneurs who are white males as well. And so we thought we try to codify what are the heuristics that are the core underlying components of an amazing entrepreneur. And for us, it's 2 qualities that we look for, because these 2 qualities encompass all the other qualities, but they are both required in the same founder. So 1, we want a founder who's an extraordinary storyteller, someone who's going to weave you in with a compelling story, because they're going to have a much easier time raising capital. They're going to attract a better team. They're going to have a larger vision. They're going to do better business deals. They're going to have more PR. Now, the thing is, it's not enough, because if that's all you have, in the worst case, you may have a Theranos, and maybe in a good case, but you have Fat.com, a company that does hundreds of millions of revenues, but never becomes profitable. So in the same individual, the same CEO founder, we want someone who's completely numbers driven, analytical, really understands the business they're in, and knows how to execute in that business. And the thing is, if you only have that, you may build a small, profitable business, but a small one. And you need both, the storyteller and the analytics. And the Venn diagram intersection of these 2 skills is rather small. There are not many people that have that. And to us, those are the superstar founders. And all the other traits, like passion, grit, et cetera, usually come across as we challenge the unit economics, as they tell the story. Number 2, do we like the business? Now, there are a lot of components that go into that. How big? What's your total addressable market size? What is the business model you're going after? Is the supply and demand fragmented? I think it all boils down to is, can you build a $1 billion leading company in your category that is going to be profitable, which means does it have good unit economics? And for me, good unit economics is a business where you recoup your fully loaded customer acquisition costs after 6 months. On a net contribution margin basis, you 3x your CAC after 18 months. And you don't know what your LTV to CAC is, but ideally with negative churn, it's 5-to-1, 10-to-1, 20-to-1. And I expect you as a founder, even early, to know this, meaning if you're pre-launch and you come and talk to me, you better know what the average order value in the industry is, what the margin structure of the industry is, and have done some landing page analysis to get an estimate of your customer acquisition costs. If you're post-launch and your unit economics are not there, I want you to have thought through and have a compelling argument as to why, with scale, you're going to get there. Maybe if you're 3x density, your delivery cost is divided by 3. Or maybe as you get scale, your cost of capital, which is debt financing, decreases and make the unit economics work. It needs to come naturally from scale and not require every single star in the multiverse to align. Number 3, are the deal terms fair? Now, there's a set. I'm not looking for an inexpensive startup deal. I don't think that exists, in fact. But I just want the valuation to be in line with the size of the opportunity, the quality of the team, and the traction that they have. And there's a set of expectations that define the market norm today, right? Most the most pre-seed deals, so pre-launch, you raise 1 and 3 to 5 pre. Most seed deals in marketplaces that have a 10 to 20% rate, the company is doing 150K a month in GMV, and they have a 15 or let's say 20% take rate, so they make 30K down revenues, and they raise 3 at 9 pre, 12 post. So raising 3 to 4 and like 6 to 12 would be the prototypical seed deal. And with that, the expectation is that the next 18 months you get to your Series A. And again, you see, so the timing matters. It can't be in 3 years. It has to be in the next 18 months. But there's an implied growth rate there. And with that, we expect you to get a 60K a month in GMV, $1 million a month in GMV, and raising 5 to 10 at like 15 to 30 rate. Now, big ranges already. That varies a lot of things. A second-time founder who's been successful the first time, who's growing really quickly, will command higher valuations. But there are still bounds. And if you're way overpriced from our perspective, we're not going to invest. And so for us at FJ Labs, all three need to be collectively true. We need to love the team, we need to love the business, and we need to think the deal terms are fair. And if any of these three is not true, we will not invest. And that's why every week when we get 100 plus deals coming our way, we invest in 2 or 3. So we're still very prolific, but it's still a 2 to 3% approval rate. Now, there's a fourth component for us, which is, does it meet our thesis of where the world is going? And we have very clearly defined theses on marketplaces, and also on the future of food, on the future of work, on the future of real estate, on the future of financing. And we want ideas that are in line with our thesis. And it's not completely thesis driven, but I'll say 70% of what we do is thesis driven.
And you keep that kind of the remainder 30% for more kind of opportunistic investments, or how do you look at that, the remainder?
So the remainder falls, I think, in 2 buckets. The remainder, bucket number 1 is, if you've been a successful founder for us in the past, we will back you no matter what you do. And so we were investors in Vettery, which is an online labor marketplace sold to Adecco. We made 8x in our investment, and we love the founders. And they decided, and of course, labor marketplace completely on thesis. The next company they decided to do, obviously, was a electric vertical takeoff aircraft company, literally like flying plane. I have zero expertise in the category, and I do not understand the aerodynamics well enough to understand whether or not the approach they're taking is better than that in the competition and Lilium, et cetera, but it doesn't matter. You've done ride buys in the past, you have a blank check, and we're gonna back you. So there's a lot of that, because at this point, we've invested in over 600 companies, we've had over 150 exits, and we've been successful on over half of them, so like maybe 75 of them. And so we've backed them whenever they came back for a new company. The other bucket is things that we think are interesting. And last week we invested in something completely out of scope. I'm friends with someone who came up who is co-founder of a company called Mootral. Mootral creates animal feed that decreases the methane emissions in animals.
Yeah,
and I think it's a massive, with a very unique business model, because they get funded by the carbon credits that you get from the methane emissions. So they can actually give away the feed for free and build a profitable business. Now, it's not a marketplace. There are a lot of components of the business that are out of my expertise, but I think it's really cool. And I love the founders and I love the approach. And so I will do these flyers. Same thing, we're investors in ATAI, which is a psychedelic compound creating company that is either creating alternatives to MDMA and psilocybin or LSD, or using them for specific better clinical outcomes. Again, not a marketplace, but amazing team doing something that I think is positive for the world, and therefore we're investors in it. So cool things. I'd say falls in that category as well, even though it's out of thesis.
Yeah, and I just learned about Mootral from an investor of theirs who's also a friend, and I think it's a really fascinating way to look, because there's so much growth in more the plant-based food options and vertical farming and all these other kind of newer models or models that are evolving. It's, I think taking a look at that approach is fascinating. Yeah, and on the kind kind of psychedelics for therapy and, and assistance in that way. I recently invested in Beckley Psytech in the UK.
I'm thinking of investing in Beckley, so
I love more.
well, but I don't know if it's competitive or not with Atai. So I need to make sure that Christian and company are okay with it. But if they're okay with it, I think I'll invest in Beckley. Same thing. It's an amazing team. I love what they're doing, and but TBD. On that one, I haven't pulled the trigger on yet.
Okay. Well, we'll try to get you over the line. Yeah, I hope it's not competitive. You had meant so in terms of your evolution of, starting your vlog, and you were already, I think, such a great blogger. And so adding the video component is great, and more the tutorial approach. And likewise, part of the reason I started to do this is I had, more time. But also for me, I think, as a woman, so much of everything I've done or I do, I kind of prefer to do kind of behind the scenes and with people I've worked with in some capacity. And during quarantine, I thought, okay, well, first of all, I love having long, intellectual conversations with people who I really respect and admire. And I kind of miss being able to do that in person. And, but also I thought, if I want to see more diversity in terms of who the investors are and who the founders are, if I want to see more women, or if I want to see more BIPOC founders, then I think that we need to diversify the investor base, because I agree with human nature. You go to what you know and who you know, and people have this subconscious stranger danger kind of approach. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe one of the ways that I can do that is by coming more out into the front and doing this kind of series. And so I'm really grateful for people like you who can, share this expertise to a wider audience. And when you were mentioning, the recruitment that you guys go through in order to do the venture creation side of the business, and then also, investment more kind of widely. I think, during this quarantine period, there's been so much attention around, Black Lives Matters and just inequities in general, right? In terms of, how people are faring during quarantine. So what do you think, as angel investors or as investors, we can do, or even founders, right? As we're recruiting our teams, what can we do? What are some different ways that we can make sure we're reaching out to new and different communities so that we can have that diversity within our management teams, or diversity within the investment community, who then pull in lots of other opportunities that, that might have been overlooked before?
I'll answer in two different ways, one at the micro level and the other one at maybe the more macro level. So at the micro level, I think you want your organization to be diverse, because at the end of the day, it should reflect the social mix of the country we live in. And I realized that rather early in my venture career, when we were all male, and I don't remember what startup we were looking at, but whatever, women's lipstick, something like that. I'm we're not the right people to be evaluating this company. We absolutely need gender diversity, and so proactively went out to change that. I mean, so if you look at our last 5 EIRs, it's 3 women, all minority, and 2 men. And actually all would be defined as minority. Now, the issue is we don't have any African Americans. They're all Asian or Hispanic. But we've definitely been trying to be very thoughtful about the makeup of our own firm, and we're majority minority, majority foreigner actually. And at the IR level, currently majority women, though no longer, in the early days, kind of imposing it. Now it's improved on its own. Even the pipeline is improved. In the early days, the number of women applicants in the program was 10%. Now I think it's up to 40%. So it's actually the top of the funnel is improving, and frankly, the quality of the people we meet are all amazing. And so the top 10 are all extraordinary. I don't think it even matters at the end of the day if we do a little bit of affirmative action in that category. It's fine, but you do want a firm that's reflective of it. The good news from that perspective, though, and I think people are very aware of it, and the investors, the LPs, the investors that are investing in venture funds are asking the funds what percentage of your portfolio is minority or women, what percentage of your actual managers or investors are. And I'd say today, if you're a talented woman or minority entrepreneur, it's probably easier than it's ever been to raise. Probably, I'd say right now, it's probably easier to raise, especially if you're a minority woman, than if you are a white male. Not a lot easier, it's definitely easier because everyone wants to invest in you, right? Like imagine you're like that African-American woman coming out of like whatever, Harvard, wants to go to venture. I think you're gonna have 50 job offers. And if you don't have it, come talk to us. So it's easier than it's ever been before, but obviously we need to rectify all the balances. And so that's more, I think, at the micro level. It's definitely moving in the right direction, but people need to be proactive and thoughtful about it, because by default, you have a tendency to hire people that look and sound like you. Where I'm optimistic as well is in terms of the makeup of the entrepreneurs. It used to be, frankly, you need to be a CS graduate at Stanford to get funded. And it's no longer true. Most of the companies that are being WeFund, for instance, or their business model innovation and business process innovation, they're not tech innovation. And it's easier than ever to build startups because of the low-code, no-code revolution. You'd be shocked by the number of several hundred million revenue startups that are built on Shopify. And so technology is an enabler, but it's no longer a requirement. And as we move down that path of low-code, no-code, more and more people with non-traditional backgrounds, that are more artistic or going to be in a position to create startups, which it hasn't been true. Now, at the macro level, what leaves me optimistic is, well, technology algorithms can be biased. They're also easier to fix. And usually they're organized to focus, the metric they're using for optimization doesn't include gender or race or social class. So imagine you were an African-American male in New York trying to get a cab, pre-Uber, most likely the cabs would not stop and pick you up. And most likely, even if they did, if you told them you were going to the Bronx, they wouldn't drive you there. And you were suffering fundamental discrimination. And what I like about marketplaces is that they actually improve user experiences and actually are deflationary. They bring costs down, and in so doing, increase equality of opportunity and equality of outcomes. And right now, with online education, with online telemedicine, you're in a position to have more opportunity than you've ever had before. Now, it's not to say that all of us are the best in the best of possible worlds. Far from it. I mean, yes, we are living the most prosperous and peaceful time in the history of humanity, but we have fundamental racial and gender inequality. Social mobility has declined. Currently, schools are funded by property taxes, so bad neighborhood, bad school, good neighborhood's good school. Access to healthcare is completely uneven by class, which is correlated with race, and real estate has become unaffordable in the major cities because we've limited construction. We've artificially created constraints in construction through zoning rights. So there are a lot of issues. The good news is, I think our job as founders and as investors is actually to build startups to actually address these. I don't think the political processes, the political realm is going to solve or address any of these issues. It's too partisan and divisive. I think the country's been built in a way that it's hard to get anything done. And I think it's by design of the founders. And as a result, I think it's up to us as entrepreneurs to go and fix it. And we are in a position to fix it and creating better outcomes for everyone. And I'm delighted that in this period, we're seeing bigger uptake of everything from online education to online healthcare, et cetera. And a lot of it, by the way, is free, right? Like Khan Academy is extraordinary. Coursera, you don't need to pay for the credentials. The actual knowledge is there for those who want it. Now, it's not to say that you're not going to have inequality, because obviously the more motivated high IQ self-learners are going to do better in that world than not. But it no longer matters that you weren't born to the right people in the right neighborhood. So I'm profoundly optimistic. It's not to say things are great, but we are making things better, and I think we will make things better. And I'm also profoundly optimistic that the other, I think, life or fundamental issue that we're grappling with in the 21st century. So one, I think, is social injustice and inequality, and the other one is climate change. And I'm also profoundly optimistic here.
Yeah, for sure. I think, some real like small tactical things, I think, investors who are in a privileged position of being inundated with great deal flow, I think, who oftentimes don't take the cold email, right? They don't respond to the cold email. I think maybe taking, the extra 30 seconds to, see, is this, a diverse founder, underestimated founder, however you want to label it. And, does this warrant, maybe somebody in the team taking a look. So I think that there are some small things that we can do to help kind of, accelerate some of the things that are already happening. But I'm hugely optimistic too. So I'm great. I'm thankful that you are.
By the way, I think over 20% of our deals, or 20% of our deals more or less, comes from cold emails. So we actually do look at cold emails. That said, we do have a minimum standard of what we expect you to put in that cold email. It just can't be, I have a great start, invest in me, or get back to me. But some of our very best deals came from cold emails, because if you're a founder, because there's another inequality we didn't talk about, is geographic inequality.
Yeah.
Like VCs invest in where they live, because they think, oh, I need to be on the board of that company, and it's way easier if I can, walk there, take the subway there, Uber there, and 30 minutes away. And so if you're even in Miami, you're let alone if you're in Nashville, you don't have the same access to capital. It makes it a lot harder to scale. But as a result, by investing in these non-traditional geos, we actually get deals that are not that competitive at reasonable valuations, with founders that are willing to be coached and would listen and are more than grateful for the help along the way on the way up to do better. So I think actually reading the cold emails is useful. There's a lot of crap, but there's also the nuggets that are worth it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm, as you know, originally from Detroit, so I'm always trying to be that kind of warm introduction for, it's an African-American majority city, and I think it's around 87% now. And so, and there's, they say Detroit hustles harder, right? And it's like, it is a city of entrepreneurs, of traditional and tech-based businesses. And so I think, where we can be good allies is, when people come to us, maybe not even, pitching us, but if we can be that, that warm introduction and somewhere else as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of the kind of the ways that you see some of the other, you mentioned, obviously marketplaces and retail-oriented e-commerce-based businesses are doing really well. A lot of trends have accelerated. You were also talking about, looking at businesses that have good unit economics, and, having a kind of media and entertainment background. For me, one of the challenges I see in more, tech-based entertainment startups is, even if they're great concepts and great teams, a lot of times they'll fall down on the unit economics, right? If it's content driven. What do you see for that kind of, that sector, more the content driven businesses? I mean, even, Calm and Headspace and, 10%, Happier are like all these are really content driven businesses.
Yeah. I think, look, I wouldn't create a pure content play, but like the ones that are related around around transactions, we're doing well, at least. Like think of Cameo, or it's all user generated content. It's a way to monetize people's B or C or D or E tier celebrities time in a way that they haven't got through before, and it's actually really well done. OnlyFans, I think, is completely crushing it, and there are a lot of these models. Then in content, things like Twitch are actually very innovative in their business models. I love how on Twitch, as a streamer, you're making money from subscriptions, or a share of the subscriptions. you get donations, and you get and you get a percentage of the advertising that's played on your channel. And so these, if you can create a large enough audience or something that's transactional, I think you do have business models that work. Now, willingness to pay for content, there's some categories where it works. So Headspace, which you mentioned, or Calm, or whatever, are doing rather well. I don't know. For the thing is, these businesses that are these subscription businesses is purely a spreadsheet model game for me. It's like, what's your customer acquisition cost? What's your net revenue per user per month, and what does a churn look like, and what do the cohorts look like, and can you make it work? And there's some businesses where I think you can make it work, and there are many where you can't. People's willingness to pay for content or to stay long enough to recoup the CAC probably isn't there. But I do think there's a lot to be done, either if you can be around a transaction or if you can blend different business models. And in fact, the Twitch business model, frankly, is I don't know, it's copied from a lot of the Chinese content plays that started innovating on like donations and subscriptions, etc. You're subscribing to a channel, you're donating, subscribing to a channel that no one else was doing before. And I think it's fascinating. It's probably harder today than to make a living off of YouTube than ever before. Just way more content than before, way more competition. CPMs are not that high. And by the way, in the pandemic, CPMs in general went down. Like the number of people bidding for keywords decreased dramatically. So the CPCs went down, the overall media volume went down. So it's probably even harder to make a living off of online advertising. I think the only way to do it is add massive scale. There are only two companies that have scale in advertising. It's Google and Facebook. I don't think anyone else. So I wouldn't want to be building a pure content business unless it was in a niche that people were willing to pay for in a subscription, of which I don't think there are very many, or if you can transactionalize it.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Transactionalizing is, I think like you said, like a lot of the success that some of the Asian players in the space, a lot of companies here have tried those different models in terms of virtual goods and things like that. Yeah. And, with variable levels of success. But I think, especially now when people are a little more cost conscious in terms of how they're spending their money, but they also have a greater demand to fill their leisure time, because there's still, most markets aren't completely open. So I think that this could be a special time to experiment with some of those.
Look, Twitch is absolutely crushing it. Absolutely crushing it. That does Amazon a lot of good. I don't think it does, and it does the streamers and the gamers a lot of good. It'll be interesting to see if they can go to the other categories, or if Twitch for X will emerge. I mean, I always thought that a Twitch for cooking should probably exist, and a number of other verticals. I mean, Twitch for cooking may end up being Twitch, but it's not obvious.
Yeah, I've definitely started cooking more. I'm like, my cooking skills over the past few months, I would always be the person like, oh no, I'm not a good cook, and now I'm like, well, what would you like? And a lot of it, like you said, like I've learned from, I'm Googling, I'm getting into these videos, or I'm following, some influencers who are like,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's been fun. So you were saying that, tomorrow is a very important day, and you were saying, you didn't see things kind of radically changing in terms of the kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem. Do you see, because I know you guys spend a lot of time thinking about the ways that markets are impacted by various different events. So what changes, if any, do you think are going to emerge over past the election and over the next, year to couple of years?
Look, the reality, the reason I don't think it impacts it, first of all, it's take it aside. I do have a clear preference, but do I think ultimately for a startup that we invested in today, who's president in the next 4 years has any impact? And the answer is no. Like, in fact, even the macroeconomic environment that the next 4 or 5 years doesn't matter. Like, the macro that matters is the macro when these companies are exiting. So any startup that we're investing in today might reach scale and start to exit in 10 years. Right? So regardless, it won't be either of the two candidates will be president at that point in time. And people, over allocate time to consuming political news and political information, which ultimately is negative, repetitive drivel. That is not all that relevant. If you take a step back and you look at the macro trends of history, what are the most important things that happened in the last 40 years? And they were not driven by the day-to-day machinations of the political machinery. It's, a billion people came out of poverty in India and in China. You have the rise and the advent of the smartphones that created an entirely new platform that has democratized dramatically access to information and access to communications. I mean, a poor Indian farmer today with an Android smartphone has access, sum total of humanity's knowledge in his pocket with Wikipedia and Google. He has access to free global communications. I mean, more information and communications the president of the United States had 20 years ago. I mean, it's mind-boggling, right? So in the mega trends of history, the day-to-day doesn't matter all that much. Now, are there specific policies that I think can be better or worse driven by different candidates? Yeah, I would much rather we have a way more liberal immigration policy. I would like that our regulatory environment for startups be very well thought through and not be merely a political venue for people like for scoring, for like trying to point and get scores on whatever is. I don't watch TVs. I don't know, C-SPAN or CNN or whatever. As you see competent senators or congressmen like interviewing the tech CEOs, showing how little they really understand the tech ecosystem at large. I worry that we have regulatory overreach and we prevent M&A, for instance, by the large companies buying startups, because that is essentially one of the fundamental pillars in which the venture and tech ecosystem relies on. That the companies that don't make it get rehired, many that do make it get acquired. Very few actually can go public and do go public. 90+% of exits are M&A. And in the US today, almost all of economic productivity and job growth comes from tech. And I would not want either side to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. And so I worry about it. I think there are a lot of policies that can be done better or worse by either candidate. But for the most part, that is not where the battlefronts are. It's like what I consider to be ridiculous, ideological wars on the battles of the past. And to me, it's the battles of the past because there's a clear trend in history towards more liberalism. Imagine that we were in the 1950s or 60s, and I tell you at that point in time that by 2020, both parties would think that IVF, gay marriage were natural, normal things and in favor of. You'd think that was that homophobia would be considered like completely irrational. You'd be so shocked by like the amount of progress I think we've made. And so yes, there are countercultural elements and counterclash towards evolution, but I think the general trend of history is towards more liberalism. And so I don't really, do the daily machinations, they move the needle back and forth. And granted, while you live through periods that are down, that were negative, it's unpleasant. But for the most part, I try to focus on macro.
Yeah, Bronco, my son is now 13, and we have these conversations all the time. He started his YouTube channel, and it's all politics and current affairs and economics. And for Halloween, he was Winston from 1984. And so he's convinced that trajectory will continue and accelerate, and I think so too, and I hope so too. In terms, because you're right, so many, of my startups, either where I've been a founder or part of the founding team, only one has gone public and the rest have been acquisitions by larger corporations. Do you see, because the IPOs have been so robust, and you were talking about SPACs earlier, do you see any reservations or any changes on the corporate acquirer side happening over the next few years? Or do you think there's still just as much of an appetite? I mean, they've got to innovate somehow, right? So
One of the books I recommend people read is Loon Shots, which is how do you maintain innovation in innovative states in companies that have like franchises that are doing well but are no longer innovating. But most larger companies and organizations are incapable of doing that, and so their digital transformation comes through acquisition. And if anything, it's more relevant for them today than ever before. And also, in a way, even though the valuations are high, it's cheaper to acquire than ever before because debt is reasonably inexpensive, because capital is reasonably inexpensive. So I see no end in sight to the trend of digital or startups being acquired by companies that are in the middle of their digital transformation. So that will continue to happen. Now, of course, if the macro becomes very negative, obviously it will slow down. For now, it's definitely frothy. The one part of the world that I have reservations with, as I said, is the SPAC world, where it feels that there are too many SPACs chasing too few good deals. It's leading to massive negative adverse selection, let's say. And I would venture to say that most SPAC investors in SPACs over a 5-10 year period will probably lose money.
Yeah. What about, I have not invested in any, so not that I won't lose out on many others, but what about SPVs? I've seen a lot more, like, I was had some calls with 500 startups as part of their VC Unlocked program. And, there are a lot of micro VCs, and micro VCs. I was like, you guys, that's like 3 or 4 angel investors. That's not an actual fund, why don't you just put together an SPV? And so have you seen much changes in terms of the kind of, growth of SPVs? And do you see any kind of advantages to SPVs as a whole, as opposed to, it seems like a proliferation of, new funds and.
Sure. Well, my recommendation if you are going to invest in a fund, invest in a fund. It will be diversified and more likely to do well. SPVs, you're highly concentrated. And by the way, the incentives are not aligned, because if I'm spewing off 20 SPVs, I don't lose money on the ones that are in a way that are losing money, and I make money on the ones that are making money. Whereas if you have a fund, typically you deduct the losses for the gains, and so your compensation is more fair. So diversification, that matters. So if you're an LP, I would be diversified. I would be in numerous funds, and if you're investing in startups directly, most studies suggest that the more investments you have, the better your returns. And so the less than 50 on average, you lost money, and over 100 you were successful, and the more you made, the more successful you were. So I would recommend, to the extent you're an accredited investor, but so do it, invest in multi-company funds, not in SPVs. I don't know. I don't spend that much time looking at that trend now. For companies that are doing really well, if you're a small fund and your pro rata is too large, there's a built-in incentive to go and build an SPV to take for the pro rata. And so I think that will probably continue to happen. I don't know, like, we don't do it very much because it's a pain in the neck. You have to raise money on a deal-by-deal basis, which it's easier. If you have a pool of money, you can call for anything. It's way easier than like raising money for a specific SPV. Maybe we don't have the right investors for it. I don't, but do you have a perspective of it ending anytime soon? Yeah, probably not. The incentives of the managers are there, and so if people are financially motivated to do something, they probably will.
Yes. And what about the platforms like SeedInvest and all these others that are attracting both accredited and non-accredited, more crowdfunding, but they're kind of combining them both? I think they're, I would say, here in the Valley, people were kind of turn their nose up at those kind of platforms before, but that some of them seem to be improving their reputation or the perceived value that they potentially provide for pre-seed or seed, especially. What are your thoughts around those different platforms that are emerging?
When you think about it from the larger, broader funding ecosystem, and I'm not going to include only venture here. There's Kickstarter on pre-sales or different products, or even there's Patreon, and it's diversifying, it's helping, or it's broadening access to capital for entrepreneurs, right? And it's now it's useful not just if you're building a venture-backed or venture-backable startup, of which, I mean, if you think of the US, the backbone of the US economy is small enterprise, but most of it is of the nail salon, restaurant, whatever, corner store, not of the venture-backable category. Venture-backed startups, which have very specific criteria in terms of like scalability, growth, capital efficiency, and capital needs that are not met by 99%, and that's totally okay. And I think in the past, if you needed to get some capital from your family, from your friends to go and build your local nail salon, that was actually harder than it should have been. And so I do like these platforms as they're democratizing access to funding for entrepreneurship writ large. And I think that's a massive net positive welfare in society. Now, is it an amazing source of deals for us? Not really. I mean, I guess we have our own proprietary deal flow. That said, like, we actually use AngelList, right? AngelList manages our friends and family funds. So all of our past entrepreneurs and all of our friends, we say, hey, do you want to invest with us? Well, and because our minimum investment or minimum check size in our main fund is $5 million. Obviously, it's out of reach for most people. But a lot of entrepreneurs or CEOs who would like diversification and access to what we do, we let them invest with us. And so the fact that there's this platform, AngelList, which allows you to have that and run it super cost effectively is amazing. Haven't looked too much at CTX. The companies, I guess our core stage is really seed, a bit more. We do pre-seed, but our bar is really high. And so we do have companies that went through CTX that now come to us when they get a proper seed, and we'll definitely value them. We don't look for deals there, but I think anything that democratizes access to capital is great. The one concern I would have is more in the non-accredited investors investing in startups. And again, I think people should be able to make their financial decision. I would recommend diversification, I guess is the only point. On average, as I said, if you invest in over 50 startups, you make money, less than 50, you lose money. And probably even more so if you don't have access to great deal flow or theses, et cetera. So I'd be more in favor of people, unless they're funding, the friend, the family, et cetera, in which case it's not necessarily even financial. I would rather people invest in funds because they're less likely to lose their share.
Yeah. And I think, like you, I started investing very, very early on in my career as an entrepreneur over 20 years ago. And I really did it primarily initially to become a better entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I really wasn't wildly optimistic about making a return at that stage. I thought I was making a good choice. And one of those ended up being, the founder of Calm. And so I got the team part right, not the business or the market right on that one. But, what are some, and vice versa, I think, being an angel helps you become a better entrepreneur, and being an entrepreneur and having that experience makes you somewhat
Absolutely.
And what kind of advice would you give to people who are, they've done their first couple of investments, but probably because somebody they respected them, and so they on those deals. What would you suggest to angel investors who are just starting to try to build up their portfolio and get access to quality deal flow, and also around their their investment thesis? You talked about your 70-30 focus at FJ Labs, but as angel investors, how does the investment focus or thesis, so people know what to send come into play?
So first of all, I actually think having a brand around something is good. So the fact that we are marketplace focused means it basically has positive network effects, because people send us marketplaces. We see so many of them that we become smarter and better about making decisions around them and evolving our thesis, which means it leads to a more or bigger brand around it and more people sending a deal. It is self-reinforcing positive feedback cycle. Now, it doesn't matter what that specificity is. If you're an amazing B2B SaaS founder, perhaps you want to go and focus on that category. Or if you are the smartest guy ever in SEO, use that skill set to help the portfolio companies and to make your assessment. So I think having a brand a level of specificity will improve your deal flow, will improve your decision making. And it could be whatever. I mean, if you're in a smaller country, it could be, I invest in seed in Chile, and that's enough. If you're in a broader country than the US, I'd say you having a focus on a stage, a category, et cetera, probably makes sense, especially in the early days. Now, in terms of how I come up with my thesis, frankly, it's more observation of the world at large, right? Like, so my thesis on the future of food came from an observation that today food is about 550 billion a year in grocery, 700 billion in restaurants, and only 30 billion or maybe 50 billion these days is online ordering. And the reason is, if you aren't ordering online today, you have low quality food, and it's expensive, and more expensive than if you had in the restaurant, and it's definitely not a great experience. And it comes with a 20 to 60 minute delay, often called with high delivery fees. But as you look at the meta trends, where you're seeing dark kitchens with and there are a lot of reasons for that, right? The reason is the food is made in restaurants that have high cost structures. They have space, they have maitre d's, they have waiters, etc. And there's not enough density, so there's reasonable delivery fee. But if you imagine a world where you have dark kitchens, and so the cost per brand to maybe $2,000 to $3,000 a month, where you have robotization, so and automation to the point that you have all your meals prepared in like sub 3 minutes, but in a super high quality way with full transparency in the ingredients. And then you have enough density or autonomy that ultimately you get food delivery to be close to zero cost structure. Then you can have super high quality food, organic transparency with every single dietary restriction you may ever have. You want keto, vegan, whatever, you can get it delivered to your door in 20 minutes or less. Well, in that world, over 50% of food will be ordered online. And so if that's true, then we're only at the very beginning of the revolution, and the Uber Eats, Seamless Grubhub, which seem to be winners today, we're only very early in that journey, and it creates a lot of opportunities. It creates opportunities in disrupting the supply chains on the B2B level, both at the grocery stores and the restaurants. It creates opportunities in verticalization and creating things like that. I mean, and so a lot of things come from that overarching thesis that in 10 years, 50% of food will be ordered in the app. And frankly, I think I can take this one step further and say in major cities where real estate comes at a premium, I suspect most people won't even have kitchens anymore. And so there's a lot of like ancillary consequences. This is more observation of the world and the mega trends, because the trends are kind of already there. Like if I go to the MIT Media Lab today, I can see that I can connect my this helmet with 256 electrodes on my head, connected to a $10 million supercomputer. I can think a thought, and you can see the thought appear on the screen. That's 85% accuracy, which is way too low, and it's super expensive, and it's unwieldy. But take that forward, where all of a sudden it's one electrode behind my ear, and the supercomputer is my smartphone, which is becoming ever more like a supercomputer every year. And I have maybe these augmented reality glasses or contact lenses, which are writing my retina. Well, all of a sudden, the fact that we're spending all of our time in this device, which is like small, low input, and yet is a $1 trillion industry, you can see that industry being replaced by the next platform. Now, I don't think it's anytime soon, because you need the mind reading component to be small and effective, and you need the AR, the lasers writing on your retina to be inexpensive, and then you'll overlay on your vision. But I can make predictions as to when that will happen just based on observing the trends in the labs, right? Same thing if I go to the labs and I see where we stand on V-flow batteries, on different battery mixes, graphene batteries, and different mixes beyond lithium ion, I can make predictions as to when I think storage will come cost effective. When combined with solar, it'll be cheaper than alternative forms of energy production, and what it means for cancer. So by, I guess, being well read and informed on the different trends in economics and technology, I think you can make predictions on the future, which can lead to the theses that you get from there.
And then we have to invite Cory Doctorow, and we need to have a big powwow, and we can hypothesize and help everyone with their future-proofing their investment thesis. I love it. So, so one of the things when I went to the Shabbat dinner in LA many, many, many years ago, and And it was amazing. There were lots of people together that, knew each other for many years, mostly people in music, and then some people who were meeting for the first time. And one of the ways that they kind of kicked off the dinner to kind of equalize that there were people that don't really know each other and people who were very intimately in relation, was they did something called a thorn, a rose, and a bud, or bud, a thorn, and a rose, whichever way you want to do it. And essentially what that is, and I'm going to throw it at you, so is, a thorn is either something that's like really challenging for you right now, like, it could be, for some people it'll be, weight loss after they've been, allowing themselves treats over the past, few months. And for some people it's enlightenment, and for some people it's getting their business to a certain stage. And so that's your kind of thorn. So I'm curious about your thorn. And I'm also curious about your rose. So what, like, you're kite surfing, you're playing paddle, you're like, your portfolio is absolutely rocking at the moment, and you're in a beautiful climate. So what amongst all of those wonderful things are the things that you're like most grateful for? And then your bud, like, what are the things you're most looking forward to, or that you're most excited about? And it could be in any aspects of your life or the world, or or whatever.
That's interesting. I don't look at the world necessarily exactly like that framework. I think I practice and preach daily gratitude and optimism, and I think it's the root basis of my fundamental happiness. And so, to answer to break down the three, is there something that I think is fundamentally annoying me, or that we're going to do differently, et cetera? I'm not so sure. Really, I don't think most of the challenges I face are, to a large extent, self-imposed. I choose to build 2 companies a year and invest in other companies, et cetera. They're not. I'm in a very privileged position, and I'm completely aware of that, to be able to allocate my time to the things I want to allocate it to, and to meet the people I want to meet. So I think it'd be disingenuous to say that I'm facing hardship in any way, shape, or form, because I don't think I am. I think I'm very grateful for the position in which I am. Now, of the things that I'm doing, which should I be most grateful for? Again, it's like I like the full. You can be. I like being a bit of a polymath with a very diverse set of interests. And so I actually like that I can do all these different things, as opposed to being monomaniacal in one. Now, arguably in life, you can be more successful by being super, super specific and super deep in one category. It's just, I think that's less interesting. And so I like the diversity of my life, and maybe that's what I'm perhaps the most grateful for, is the fact that I'm in a position to be physically, intellectually stimulated, and to keep finding new ways to do that, right? Like writing more than ever, or creating a show, which I never occurred to me would be something that warranted being doing. And I'm very grateful that I guess I might help to be in a position to do all that. And what am I looking forward to? I have a very clear vision of, I think, where the world is heading, and why I actually think things are getting better, even though if you follow the news, you wouldn't believe that to be true. But objectively it is. But more importantly, I do think we are facing 2 fundamental, I don't know if they're fundamentally existential threat, but they're definitely real threats. On one hand, as I said, the social injustice and equality issues, and the other one on climate change. But I'm profoundly optimistic that we have it within our means to address both, and especially as tech entrepreneurs and founders and investors. And I actually look forward to seeing it play out with the optimistic outcome that I have in mind.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know. I started off my career as a public interest environmental lawyer, in DC. And so, I primarily focused on protecting wild animals and clean water. living here in California when we've had, it just seems like each year wildfires get worse, and obviously that's primarily caused, by climate change. And then, you're stuck in quarantine, and, you can't even watch Netflix or listen to music unless you've, bought an extra generator because PG&E, shut down all the power, for a lot of different reasons, but allegedly because of the fires. Also, I think concern with liabilities and lack of investment in infrastructure. But, and I really hope that we start to take that one, like on a personal level, what each of us can do, and also on a kind of more macro level, what all countries can kind of do to improve that situation. But you were talking about like the different areas of success. And I guess one of the things I'd kind of want to wrap with is, you've been so successul in all of these different areas of your life. And, I think, and, I was reading on your blog about, the happiest man in the world or the happiest person in the world. And I was like, I want that. That's what I want to like, oh my God, I want to put that in my resume. So what do you what can you offer to other people to kind of be like, when I think of you, I think of like you're your best version of you. I think you're a great guy. You've done lots of amazing different things in your personal and your professional life, and you've done them all really, really well. So what can you offer to other people to help them, create whatever version of success they've kind of defined for themselves?
So first of all, success is not an uninterrupted stream of success. No. Like I've had many failures along the way, personal and professional, and sometimes very publicly. I mean, from essentially going bankrupt at 25, 26 to living in New York and at the office at $2 a day for 2 years, to frankly picking the wrong country to go and try to build a gathering point for intellectuals and entrepreneurs and thought leaders to meet just for fun, but build a business model. And so I've had my fair string of failure, but I think the question is, how do you respond to it, and how do you deal with it? Do you let it define you? And to me, it's that challenge of the way, and there were lessons to be learned to get to where I needed to be. Now, in terms of what to offer to others, and I thought long and hard with what ultimately the meaning of my life is, and I think my role here is to actually harness the deflationary power of technology to improve people's user experiences, to improve their purchasing power, and to actually address some of the changes that we're seeing in the world. And that's at the macro trend level. And the micro level, I think, is the reason that I'm reading and I'm writing and I'm organizing what I show, is to share all the lessons I have in a somewhat scalable way. And everything that I wish I knew 20 years ago, I'm trying to share today with aspiring entrepreneurs.
Yep. Well, I'm glad you're sharing so much, because I think it is really helpful, for those who are most experienced. A lot of times we need those reminders because we just kind of go down rabbit holes, and then it's like, oh yeah, let me come back up and take a breath, and then, think about things. And then for others who are just at the starting of their journeys, you're sharing such a wealth of experience. So I want to thank you on behalf of all entrepreneurs and investors for that. And I think one of the things I love most about you is just your positivity. And I think any of us that have had these, kind of journeys can get exasperated and, and just feel like chucking it in and doing something easier. And I think, you're one of those positive voices, and I think it helps people reset just to kind of hear your words of encouragement. So thank you. And thank you for being honest with your time today. I wish we would have had the conversation in Turks and Caicos. Did you do Halloween? Did you dress up?
Well, I didn't have, there's no story to buy the costumes, but I dressed up in my Burning Man outfit.
Okay, all right. The sequins, yeah, I love it. Nice. Cool. Well, thanks again, Fabrice. I really appreciate it, and we'll share this on demand for people who weren't able to make it for the live stream. So,
perfect. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.